The security guards were dragging her out of the bank, calling her a dirty vagrant, until she pulled out a document that made the CEO fall to his knees, because this homeless woman they just humiliated wasn't begging for money. She was the one who owned every dollar in that building. Margaret Chen stood outside First National Bank of Manhattan, her weathered hands gripping a worn leather bag. At 58, she looked like countless other homeless individuals who populated the city's financial district. Her gray hair hung in tangled strands, her clothes bore the stains of street life, and her shoes had holes that let in the October rain. But Margaret's story was far from ordinary. The marble steps of First National had once felt familiar beneath her feet. 40 years ago, she had climbed these same steps as Margaret Chen Morrison, the brilliant young economist who had co-founded this very institution with her late husband, David Morrison. Together, they had built an empire from nothing, transforming a small community bank into one of the most powerful financial institutions on the East Coast. That was before the betrayal, before David's business partners convinced him that Margaret was unstable, unreliable, a liability to their growing success. Before the lawyers, the forged documents, and the night she was forced to sign away everything she had built. Before David died in a mysterious car accident, leaving her with nothing but questions and a leather bag containing the one document that could change everything. Now, she was ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. Margaret pushed through the heavy glass doors, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. The lobby was exactly as she remembered. Soaring ceilings, imported marble, and the soft hum of wealth being counted. Employees in tailored suits moved with practiced efficiency, their eyes gliding past her as if she were invisible, but not everyone ignored her. "Excuse me, ma'am." A security guard approached, his voice sharp with authority. "This is a private institution. You'll need to leave." Margaret looked up at him calmly. "I have business here." The guard's partner joined them, both men towering over her small frame. "Ma'am, we're going to have to ask you to step outside. This isn't a shelter." Their voices grew louder, drawing attention from the tellers and customers. Whispers began to spread across the marble lobby like ripples in water. "Is that a homeless person? How did she get in here? Someone call security. Oh wait, they're already here." Margaret reached into her bag, her fingers finding the document she had protected for decades. But before she could speak, a voice cut through the murmur. "What is this commotion?" Richard Sterling emerged from the elevator, his silver hair perfectly styled, his Italian suit worth more than most people's annual salaries. As the current CEO of First National, he commanded respect through fear and intimidation. His cold blue eyes assessed the situation with the calculation of a predator. "Mr. Sterling," the first guard said, relief evident in his voice, "we're handling a vagrant situation. She'll be removed immediately." Richard's gaze fell on Margaret, and for a moment something flickered in his expression. Recognition. Impossible. The woman he was looking at bore no resemblance to the polished executive he had helped destroy 4 decades ago. "Sir," Margaret said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness, "I believe we have unfinished business." Richard's face hardened. "I don't know who you think you are, but security will escort you out. This bank doesn't conduct business with its rightful owner." Margaret interrupted, her hand now firmly grasping the document in her bag. The lobby fell silent. Even the distant sound of keyboards seemed to pause. Richard's laugh was sharp and cruel. "Rightful owner? Listen, lady, I don't know what fantasy you're living in, but this bank belongs to legitimate shareholders. Guards, remove her. Now." The security guards moved forward, their hands reaching for Margaret's arms. The gathered crowd of employees and customers watched with a mixture of amusement and discomfort. Some pulled out phones, recording what they assumed would be a simple removal of a delusional homeless woman. But Margaret didn't resist. Instead, she pulled the document from her bag with steady hands. "Before you touch me," she said, her voice gaining strength, "you might want to look at this." She unfolded the papers, yellowed with age but perfectly preserved. The letterhead of Morrison & Associates law firm was clearly visible, along with official seals and signatures. Richard's face began to drain of color as he recognized the legal terminology, the corporate structure, the names. "This is the original founding document of First National Bank," Margaret announced, her voice now carrying to every corner of the lobby. "Signed by David Morrison and Margaret Chen Morrison on March 15, 1984. It clearly states that in the event of David Morrison's death, full ownership and control of the institution would transfer to his surviving business partner and wife. The security guard's hands froze inches from her arms. Richard snatched the document, his eyes scanning the legal text with growing horror. His hands began to tremble as he read names, dates, and clauses that had been buried for decades. This is impossible," he whispered. "You're Margaret Chen Morrison, but you're dead?" Margaret smiled for the first time in years. "That's what you all believed, isn't it? That the car accident took both David and me. Very convenient for those who wanted to steal what we built." The crowd pressed closer, phones now recording every word. Richard's face had gone from pale to ashen as the implications crashed over him like a tsunami. "You see," Margaret continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "I survived that crash. Barely. Spent months in a coma, years in rehabilitation. When I finally recovered enough to reclaim what was mine, I discovered that Richard Sterling and his associates had systematically erased my existence from the company records, forged death certificates, falsified documents, bribed officials." She turned to address the growing crowd of employees and customers. "For 40 years, I've lived on the streets of the city where I once commanded boardrooms. I've watched from the shadows as these men built their fortunes on the foundation David and I created. I've seen them foreclose on families, destroy small businesses, show zero compassion for those less fortunate." Her gaze returned to Richard, who was still staring at the document as if it might disappear. "I chose to live among the people you forgot, Richard, the homeless, the desperate, the invisible. I learned what true humanity looks like, and today, I'm here to restore this institution to its original purpose." Richard's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Even if this document is real, you can't just... The board of directors, the shareholders, the regulatory authorities." Margaret reached into her bag again, this time producing a thick folder. Copies of every forged document, every bribed official, every illegal transaction from the past 4 decades. "I've spent years gathering evidence. The FBI has been very interested in our conversations." As if summoned by her words, the lobby doors opened and federal agents entered, their badges visible, their purpose clear. Richard Sterling, the man who had ruled First National Bank with an iron fist for decades, slowly sank to his knees on the marble floor he had once commanded. The document fluttered from his nerveless fingers as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "Margaret Chen Morrison," the lead agent said with professional courtesy, "we've been expecting you." The lobby erupted in chaos as employees processed what they had witnessed. The homeless woman they had ignored, dismissed, and nearly ejected was now revealed as their true boss. Camera phones captured every moment as Richard and his associates were led away in handcuffs. Margaret stood in the center of it all, no longer invisible, no longer powerless. She looked around at the faces of the employees, some shocked, some ashamed, some fearful for their jobs. "Don't worry," she said, her voice carrying easily through the marble space. "This bank will continue to operate, but it will operate with compassion, with integrity, and with a commitment to serving all members of our community, including those who sleep on the streets outside these doors." She paused, looking up at the soaring ceiling she had helped design. After all, everyone deserves a second chance, even a homeless woman who owns a bank. 6 months later, First National Bank had transformed. Under Margaret's leadership, it became the first major financial institution to offer comprehensive services to the homeless community, including job training programs, microloans, and transitional housing assistance. Margaret kept a small office on the ground floor, its windows facing the street where she had spent so many years invisible and forgotten. On her desk sat a framed photo, herself and David on the day they first opened the bank, young and hopeful and ready to change the world. She had finally kept that promise, and sometimes late at night she would stand at those windows and nod to the homeless individuals who still gathered on the steps outside. They were no longer invisible to her. They never had been. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe for more stories that prove the power of justice and redemption. Your support means everything to us.